Do you ever wonder what the limit of silence is? For me, it was a Tuesday morning, a cold cup of coffee, and a lemon yellow sticky note. 12 years, 144 months, 4,382 days, all erased by 3 hurried words. Don't find me. He wanted freedom, but he forgot he was the one who gave me the key to the cage. When he returned 6 months later for his kingdom, he did not find a waiting queen. He found an executioner. My name is Eliza Vance. Eli, to anyone who mattered. At 38. I was the chief operating officer of Vanguard Solutions, the Seattle tech consultancy I had built from the ground up. I was the brain, the engine, the operational spine. My husband, Julian, who was 40, was the face. He was the CEO, the charmer who played golf and closed deals with a smile that could disarm a firing squad. Our Kit Harris was a minimalist cage of glass and brushed steel, overlooking Lake Washington. It was 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the rain was doing what Seattle rain does best. It was trying to drown the world. The sound was a relentless drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows. I stared at the note. It was lemon yellow, stuck to the stainless steel front of the espresso machine, right where I would see it. Eli, I need space, need freedom, don't find me. His handwriting was the same confident, careless scrawl he used to sign million-dollar contracts. I read it 3 times. The coffee in my mug was cold. I took a sip, and the only thing I tasted was the metallic tang of betrayal. It was sharp, like sucking on a penny. There were no tears. No screaming void opened up in the floor. The panic I should have felt simply refused to arrive. Instead, a terrifying, crystalline clarity settled over me. The drumming rain faded, and all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator and the click of my own thoughts slotting into place. 12 years of marriage, 4,382 days, gone. My hand was perfectly steady as I picked up my phone. I did not call him. I did not call my mother. I opened my banking app. The joint personal account. Gone. Drained to the last few $100s. He had left me just enough for groceries. How thoughtful. My fingers moved to the business accounts. I held my breath for a second, then exhaled. Untouched. Of course they were. Vanguard Solutions required dual authorization for any transfer over $10,000. Julian had always laughed about the paperwork. That's your thing, Eli. You handle the details. He had no idea the details were the only things that mattered. I remembered our anniversary dinner, just last week, our 12th. He had raised his glass of champagne, his blue eyes sparkling. To new horizons, Eli, he had said. I smiled, thinking he meant the expansion into the Asian market we had been planning for the 3rd quarter. I thought he meant our horizons. The fool. I was the fool. He meant his... My thumb hovered over the contact for David, our corporate counsel. I pressed it. Eli, it's early. Everything okay? David was always awake. David, it's Eli, I said. My voice was calm, measured, the voice of a COO handling a crisis. I need you to pull Julian's employment contract, review the non-compete and intellectual property clauses, immediately, and David bill this to my personal account. A beat of silence. Right now, Eli. Right now. I hung up. I walked into our shared home office. The rain lashed the windows here. 2. I went to the walk-in safe hidden behind a minimalist print. I punched in my code. I was looking for his passport. If he was still in the country, it would be here. It was sitting right on top of my old stock certificates. He had not even taken his passport. My eyes scanned the small metal box, and I saw it, tucked behind the binders of old tax returns. A small black USB drive. It was not mine. A piece of white tape was stuck to it, with 2 words in his handwriting, Project Ascent. My blood, which had been cold, turned to ice. Project Ascent was our internal code name for the new proprietary algorithm we had spent 3 years and $50 million developing. It was the future of the company. It was worth hundreds of millions. I walked back to my laptop, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I plugged the drive in. It was all there. A complete clone of our entire source code, every line, every secret. He had not just left me. He had not just stolen our savings. He was trying to execute a corporate assassination. He was committing grand larceny. He was trying to steal my life's work. And in that moment, the cold clarity became a cold fire. He wanted freedom. I would give him a war. I understood Julian's greatest weakness because it was also his greatest strength, his pride. He believed he was invincible, the golden boy who could talk his way out of anything. And I understood my greatest weakness to his family. I was an outsider, the smart, quiet girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had married their charismatic heir. I had been Mrs. Vance for 12 years, but I was not a Vance. Not really. So I did not call my friends to cry. I did not call a divorce lawyer. I called Arthur Vance. Arthur, Julian's father, was an old-world tycoon. He had built his empire on timber and shipping long before Seattle became a tech hub. He was the one who had provided the seed money for Vanguard, a $1 million investment he made as a bet on me, not his son. Our relationship was one of distant mutual respect. He despised Julian's superficial charm and lazy extravagance, but he admired my relentless efficiency. He saw me as the engine, and Julian as the shiny, expensive hood ornament. His assistant was surprised to hear from me. "Eliza, Mr. Vance is in a board meeting." "It's an emergency," I said. "A matter of family legacy." That word, legacy, was the key. He met me an hour later at the Rainier Club, that old money fortress of dark wood, leather, and silence. I arrived in my work attire, a sharp charcoal gray suit. I was not carrying tissues. I was carrying the black USB drive. Arthur was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, a cup of black coffee untouched before him. He was 70, with a full head of silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Eliza," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You look distressed." "I'm not distressed, Arthur," I said, sitting opposite him. "I'm precise." I did not waste time. I slid the USB drive across the polished mahogany table. "Julian left me this morning." His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. "He left a note. He also emptied our joint accounts, but that's not why I'm here." I leaned forward. "He's not just leaving me, Arthur. He's trying to gut the company you built. He's trying to steal it." I told him about the drive. Project Ascent, the entire source code. Arthur's face, normally impassive, darkened. "He's been in contact with Syntropy," I said, naming our largest competitor. "I found fragments of deleted emails on his home computer. He's trying to sell them our IP. He's not just leaving. He's cashing out, and he's willing to destroy Vanguard to do it." Arthur's reaction was not the hot anger of a betrayed father. It was the cold fury of a king whose line has been threatened. This was no longer about a failed marriage. This was about the Vance name. This was a declaration of war against his legacy. He stared at the USB drive for a full minute. Then, he picked up his phone. He made one call. "Marcus, get to the club. Now. Eliza is here. Julian has betrayed us." Marcus Vance was the older son, the reliable one, the one who ran the family's private equity fund with quiet competence. He was everything Julian was not reserved, analytical, and completely overshadowed. Julian got the charm, Marcus got the work, and Julian had made a career of belittling him. Marcus arrived in 20 minutes, his face a mask of confusion. I explained it again, this time with the cold precision of a quarterly report. When I finished, Marcus looked at his father. "He's going to burn us to the ground." "No," Arthur said. His voice was final. "He is not." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "What do you want, Eliza?" I want to protect the company. I want to stop him." "No," Arthur said again, dismissing my answer. "What do you want?" He did this to you. He did this to us. What is your price? I don't have a price. Arthur, I have a plan. I laid it out. Julian believed I was a mess. He believed I was helpless. He was counting on it. He thought the company would founder without him, that we would beg him to come back. He was arrogant. He underestimates me, I said. And he underestimates his family. He thinks you'll cover for him. He thinks you'll clean up his mess, like you always do. He is wrong, Arthur said. We don't just want him gone, Marcus said, his voice surprisingly venomous. We want him ruined. For this, he needs to be ruined. An alliance was formed in that dark, quiet room, not of in-laws, but of shareholders. We were not there to mourn a marriage. We were there to plan an execution. The family trust controls 30% of Vanguard, Arthur said. Julian controls his 20%. You control your 20. The rest is employee stock. The trust gives us the controlling interest. He turned to Marcus. Draw up the papers. Full proxy control. Eliza will vote the family's shares. All of them. Marcus nodded, a thin, cold smile playing on his lips. He won't see it coming. He'll think you're still his dutiful wife. Arthur looked at me. My status as an outsider was gone. In one act of spectacular betrayal, Julian had made me the most trusted person in the room. I was no longer the abandoned wife. I was their chosen weapon. Go to work, Eliza, Arthur said. Protect my company. Do whatever you have to do. I walked back into Vanguard Solutions at 9 a.m. The office was buzzing, as it always was on a Tuesday, but it went quiet as I walked through the open plan floor. Julian was the fun boss. He bought the ping-pong table and the beer keg. I was the hard boss. I was the one who checked the code, balanced the budgets, and enforced the deadlines. They were expecting Julian. They got me. I sent a company-wide email at 9:30 a.m. Effective immediately. Julian Vance will be taking an unplanned, extended personal sabbatical to recharge. All operational and strategic oversight will be handled by me. We have a busy quarter ahead. Let's focus. The rumors started in seconds. I could feel the vibrations, the Slack messages flying. I ignored them. At 10 a.m., I called an all-hands meeting in the main atrium. They gathered, nervous, whispering. I stood in front of them, holding a microphone, my voice amplified and steady. There will be a lot of speculation, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the glass-filled space. Here is the truth: Vanguard is entering a new phase. Julian's sabbatical is personal. Our work is professional. To that end, I am announcing a new, aggressive growth strategy. We are pivoting, we are streamlining, and we are promoting from within. I pointed to Dr. Aravind Sharma, our brilliant head of R&D, a man Julian had consistently stifled because his ideas were too complex for investors. Aravind, I said, you are now Chief Technology Officer. Your side projects are now our main focus. You have a green light and a new budget. See me after this meeting. Aravind stared, shocked. Then, slowly, a look of fierce loyalty settled on his face. I had just unshackled my most valuable asset. The rest of the staff was stunned into silence. I had not explained. I had commanded. My life became a machine. I worked 18-hour days. I stopped going home to the glass house on the lake. The memories were not sad. They were irrelevant. They were data from a failed project. I slept on the gray sofa in my office. My diet consisted of black coffee and a cold, sharp fire that burned in my stomach. I was a ghost in the machine I had built, tuning the gears, optimizing the code, and cutting out the malignant parts. The first cut was the board, with the proxy for Arthur and Marcus's 30%, combined with my own 20%. I held a 50% controlling interest. I called an emergency board meeting via teleconference. Given the CEO's sudden abandonment of his fiduciary duties, I said, reading from a prepared legal statement, I am exercising my controlling vote to restructure. 2 board seats are hereby eliminated. The CEO position is suspended. It was a bloodbath. It took 45 minutes. The second cut was surgical. David, our lawyer, worked with me through the night. We formed a new subsidiary, a Delaware C Corp. I called it Aegis Labs. Aegis, the shield. Then, citing security protocols and the Ascent Project's sensitive nature, I executed a legal transfer of all of Vanguard's intellectual property to the new subsidiary. All of it. The code, the patents, the algorithms. All now the property of Aegis Labs, a company I controlled 100%. Vanguard Solutions, Julian's company, was now just a service layer, a hollow shell that owned nothing. The third cut was personal. I called a high-end real estate broker. "I need to sell the house on Lake Washington," I said. "Immediately." "Eliza, that's a $12 million property. The market's a bit soft. To sell it fast, you'd have to take a serious cut." "I understand," I said. "I need liquidity. Fast. Find me a cash buyer. I'll take a loss." She found one in 3 days. A private equity fund, a shell company, offering $9 million. "It's a lowball, Eli," she advised. "Take it," I said. I signed the papers. What she did not know was that the shell company was run by Marcus Vance's fund. The $9 million in cash was not mine. It was family money, moving from one pocket to another. The check was immediately wired into a new, secure trust account, an account Julian's name had never touched, an account he would never find. The house was no longer a marital asset. It was a holding of the Vance family, and I had been paid for my trouble. I moved into a sterile, furnished high-rise apartment in Bellevue. White walls, gray furniture, a wall of glass overlooking a city. Not a lake. It was a fortress. It was a waiting room. I unpacked my one suitcase, sat on the unfamiliar sofa, and for the first time in weeks, I closed my eyes. The machine was built. Now, I just had to wait for the rat to walk into the trap. With the company stabilized and the assets secured, I moved to the offensive. I did not hire a PI to find Julian. I did not care where he was. I hired one to find the money. I also hired a forensic accountant, a woman named Harris, known for her ability to find financial ghosts. "I don't care about his movements," I told them in my new, sterile apartment. "I care about his liabilities. Find his spending. Find his weaknesses. Find her." It took the PI less than 48 hours. The money trail from our joint account was a bright, stupid line pointing straight to Miami. He had been sloppy. The PI, a former Mossad agent named Ari, was not. "His new girlfriend's name is Chloe," Ari reported, his voice flat over the phone. 24 years old, a model, an aspiring yoga instructor, an Instagram influencer. "Of course. He's been wiring her money for 6 months," Ari continued. "He just put a down payment on a 40-foot yacht in South Beach. He's using a shell LLC based in the Caymans. Vance Global Holdings. Not very creative." 2 days later, a secure email landed in my inbox. It was a file from Ari. Photos. Julian, tan, beaming, looking 10 years younger. He was on the deck of the yacht. Freedom painted on the stern. He had his arm around Chloe, a girl so young and beautiful she looked computer-generated. They were drinking champagne. I stared at the photo. I waited for the sting of jealousy, the hot spike of betrayal. Nothing. I felt nothing but a profound, weary contempt. He was a cliché, a 40-year-old man having a midlife crisis, funded by theft. He was so utterly, painfully predictable. The report from Harris, the accountant, was far more interesting. It arrived a week later, a thick, bound document. "Mr. Vance was not spontaneous," she explained via video call. "This was not a sudden decision. He has been embezzling from Vanguard for over 2 years." My blood ran cold. Small amounts. Expense report padding, consulting fees to ghost vendors, diverted bonuses. It's sophisticated. He's been siphoning off approximately $20,000 a month. He was building a nest egg. This was a long-term plan to fund his exit. 2 years. He had been planning this for 2 years. He had smiled at me over dinner, slept in my bed, and planned our future, all while methodically stealing from the company I had built. But that was not the worst of it. The twist was in the final appendix. "He didn't just steal your code, Eliza," Harris said, her voice grim. "He stole your biggest client, Pharmadyne, our largest account, responsible for 30% of our annual revenue. He used his shell company, Vance Global Holdings, to sign a private consulting contract with Pharmadyne's CEO. It was signed 3 weeks before he left. He convinced them Project Ascent was his own personal invention and that he was spinning it off from Vanguard. He offered to sell them an exclusive license for 50% less than your current contract. He was not just stealing the code. He was stealing our future. He was taking our flagship client and our crown jewel in one move. I booked a flight to New Jersey. I was in the office of Greg Pullman, the CEO of Pharmadyne, at 9 a.m. the next day. He was a portly man who affected a good old boy charm. "Eliza." "What a surprise. Julian didn't tell me you were coming." "Julian doesn't know I'm here," I said. I sat down without being invited. "I'm not here as Julian's wife. Greg, I'm here as the COO of Vanguard Solutions, the company you are currently defrauding." His smile vanished. "Now, I don't know what you mean by that." I placed a folder on his desk. I did not threaten him. I did not raise my voice. I simply presented the facts. "This," I said, tapping the cover, "is a copy of the wire transfer from Pharmadyne to Vance Global Holdings, an illegal shell corporation. And this," I added a second document, "is the signed affidavit from our head of R&D, stating that Project Ascent is the sole and exclusive property of Vanguard Solutions, which means this," I added the third and final document, "is a copy of the secret contract you signed with my husband, a contract for stolen goods." I leaned in. "I am calling this a one-time courtesy. Greg, as of this moment, your company is an active co-conspirator in a federal case of intellectual property theft. You have 2 options. You can cooperate fully with me, or you can explain to your shareholders why you exposed Pharmadyne to a $100 million lawsuit and criminal charges. Your choice." Greg Pullman's face turned the color of ash. He stared at the documents, his bravado evaporating. He was trapped. "What do you want?" he whispered. "I want 2 things. First, you will immediately terminate your fraudulent contract with Julian Vance. Second, you will provide me with a sworn, notarized affidavit detailing every conversation, every promise, and every transaction he made with you regarding this deal." He panicked. He called his lawyer. The conversation was short. By noon, I had the affidavit, I had the canceled contract, and I had a terrified, powerful new ally. As I walked out of the Pharmadyne headquarters into the cold New Jersey air, I checked my phone. I now had a wire fraud charge to add to the list. I now had a federal case. The hunt was over. The execution could begin. It was month 3. The panic at the company had subsided, replaced by a humming, nervous energy. The machine was running smoothly because I had rebuilt it. I was in full control. It was time to announce the birth of the new and the death of the old. I called a press conference, not just for the tech journals, but for the mainstream financial news. The room was packed. They smelled blood in the water. They thought they were there to witness the collapse of a Seattle startup. I walked onto the stage, not in the simple blouses and skirts Julian preferred, but in a bespoke navy blue suit that fit like armor. "Good morning," I said, my voice crisp and amplified. "For the past quarter, this company has been undergoing a significant restructuring. Today, I am here to announce its completion. Vanguard Solutions is dissolved." Gasps from the floor, a flurry of typing. "In its place," I continued, and the new logo lit up the screen behind me, a stylized, steely shield. "We are launching Aegis Labs. Aegis is a new entity, focused on next-generation security and predictive analytics, built on the foundation of our most secure and valuable intellectual property." A reporter shouted, "What about your CEO, Julian Vance?" "Mr. Vance is no longer affiliated with this company," I said, my face impassive. Aegis Labs is moving forward. I am the Chief Executive Officer. Arthur Vance will serve as honorary chairman of the board, and Marcus Vance will hold a seat. We are consolidated, we are funded, and we are hiring. It was not a restructuring, it was a coronation. The story exploded. The following week, my face was on the cover of Forbes, Northwest Edition. The headline, "The Woman Rebuilding Northwest Wall Street." They had used a photo from the press conference. I looked powerful, cold, and in control. The article detailed the pivot, the new structure, the silent backing of the Vance family. The reporter had, of course, asked about Julian. The article quoted my response verbatim. The reporter asked about your co-founder. The text read, Eliza Vance paused, then said simply, "We had different visions for the future. I chose the future." I had changed. The long, practical hair I used to tie back was gone, replaced by a sharp, asymmetrical bob that grazed my jawline. I moved into my Bellevue fortress permanently. I bought new clothes tailored, strong, modern. I was no longer the wife, the partner, or the COO. I was the general. While the press was focused on the new company, David was busy with the old marriage. "He hasn't responded to any of the filings," David told me over the phone. "Good," I said. "Finalize it." And he did. The divorce was granted by a judge in absentia. The grounds were simple and brutal abandonment and constructive financial fraud. The decree was absolute. I was, in the eyes of the law, a free woman. I celebrated, not with champagne, but with a purchase. I bought a boat, not a yacht, not a symbol of leisure. I bought a 30-foot cigarette boat, a sleek, blade-like machine built for speed, with 2 massive engines. It was not for parties. It was for escape. I spent my weekends on the cold, gray waters of Puget Sound, teaching myself how to handle it, how to make it cut through the waves at 70 miles an hour. The wind and the spray were so loud they drowned out all thought. On the last day of the 3rd month, I performed one final act. I had Ari, my investigator, track down the photos from Pharmadine's company retreat the previous summer. There he was, Julian, arm in arm with Greg Pullman, laughing with Greg's wife, ruffling his young son's hair, the picture of a trusted family friend. I printed the photos in high gloss. I put them in an expensive black envelope. I added a single, simple note card, written in my new, bold handwriting. It said he lied to me, too. I mailed the package to Ms. Chloe in Miami. I did not do it out of jealousy. I did it to light a fire. A cornered animal is dangerous, but one whose new life is also burning down. That animal makes mistakes. I was sowing chaos, and I would be waiting. It was the 5th month. I was in a budget meeting for the 4th quarter when my phone lit up on the conference table. An email. Not to my new Aegis Labs address, but to my old, dormant Vanguard account, an account I kept active for just this reason. The sender, Julian Vance. My team, the new, hungry team I had built, fell silent as I picked up the phone. I read the subject line, "We need to talk." I excused myself from the meeting. I walked to my office, the corner office with the glass walls, and closed the door. I read the email. It was not an apology. It was not a plea for forgiveness. It was a negotiation, written by a man who thought he held all the cards. Eli. It began. I know you're mad. I get it. I was a mess, but I've had time to think, and this separation has been good for me, for us. Let's be realistic. You can't run the company without me. You're a great COO, but you're not the face. You're not the vision. My hand was steady. I continued reading. I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. I've been following the news, and this Aegis Labs thing sounds desperate. I'm ready to come back. We can dissolve this Aegis nonsense and restore Vanguard. I'll resume my role as CEO, but I'll need you to step back. I'll take a senior consultant title, with a controlling interest of 50%. Given the trouble you've caused, I'll also need a signing bonus to fix my finances. Let's say $2 million, wired to my offshore account. He genuinely believed I was failing. He thought the Forbes article was a desperate PR stunt. He had not done his homework. He had not realized that the Pharmadyne lawsuit, which Greg Pullman had filed against his shell corporation for fraud, was my doing. He had not realized that his accounts were not just low, they were frozen by a federal judge. He was not just broke, he was cornered. He was swimming in quicksand and thought he was on a beach. The email concluded with the most predictable, pathetic flourish of all. On a personal note, Chloe and I are finished. It was a mistake. She was incredibly shallow. Eli. All she cared about was money. It made me realize that you are the only one who ever truly understood me. You're the one I need. I'm ready to come home. I looked at the words. She was incredibly shallow. The sheer, blinding, astronomical audacity of the man. The tritoness of it all. It was not just insulting. It was lazy. It made me nauseous. He had not learned a thing. He had not changed. He was exactly the same arrogant, narcissistic fool who had left a sticky note on my coffee machine. I did not pause. I did not reflect. I acted. I forwarded the entire email chain to 3 people, David, Arthur, and Marcus. My subject line was 2 words, proof of extortion. I sat back in my leather chair and watched the Seattle rain start to fall against my window. My phone buzzed less than 60 seconds later. It was a reply from David. This is it, Eli. This is wire fraud. He is attempting to extort a corporation across state lines, using electronic communication, to obtain money under false pretenses. He just handed us his own head. We have enough. The U.S. Attorney's Office will love this. We are done. I smiled. A thin, cold smile. I opened a new message and began to type my reply to Julian. I kept it simple. I kept it compliant. I made it sound like the words of a woman who was beaten. Fine, Julian, you're right. We need to talk. We need to fix this. I hit send. Then I sent a follow-up. Next week, Tuesday, 10 a.m., your old office. I'll be there. I was offering him his old office. I was offering him bait. And I knew. I absolutely knew. His pride would not let him refuse. The trap was set. The door was closing. It was Tuesday, 10 a.m., exactly 6 months to the day he had left the note. I had been watching from my office window, which overlooked the street, since 9:45. I saw the Uber pull up. I saw him get out. He was thinner. The Miami tan was real, but it was layered over a foundation of fatigue. His expensive suit hung on him, a size too big. The golden boy charm that had defined him was gone, replaced by a brittle, tired arrogance. He looked like a man who had been living on champagne and anxiety. He paused in front of the building. I could see the confusion on his face as he stared up at the large, brushed steel letters that now read, Aegis Labs. He checked his phone. He must have thought he had the wrong address. He walked in, then hesitated, looking lost in the lobby he had designed. Our new receptionist, a sharp young woman named Sarah, looked up. Can I help you, sir? I watched on my security feed. I'm Julian Vance, he said, as if the name should part the seas. I'm here to see Eliza, Sarah typed, her face placid. Vance. Yes, Mr. Vance. She is waiting for you in the rooftop conference room. I'll have someone show you up. He repeated, confused by the pronoun. The boss. She's waiting. He was led to the elevators. I watched him walk through the main floor. His pace slowed. The office was unrecognizable. It was packed, silent, and productive. The open-plan space he had filled with a ping-pong table and a beer keg was now a humming grid of workstations. The bright, garish colors he had loved were gone, replaced with cool grays, whites, and deep blues. We had over 20 new employees, none of whom looked up as he passed. He was a ghost. He was nobody. The elevator doors opened on the top floor. He was led to the main conference room, the one we had reserved for major clients, the one with the 30-foot-long black marble table and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Puget Sound. I was already there. I was standing at the window, my back to the door, looking out at the gray water. I heard the door open and his footsteps falter on the carpet. He waited for me to turn around. I did not. "Eli," he said, trying to inject that old, familiar charm into his voice. It cracked. You've changed everything. The place looks a little cold." "Sit down, Julian," I said. My voice was as cold as the marble. It was not a request. I heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. He had chosen the one at the far end of the table, 30 feet away from me. He was trying to reclaim his old spot, the seat at the head. I turned, slowly. I looked at him, this strange, diminished man, sitting all alone at the end of my table. He tried to smile. It was a weak, nervous grimace. "So," he started, "this is a bit dramatic. Don't you think Aegis Labs really—" He was trying to take control, to frame this as my little fit of pique. "You wanted to talk. Julian," I said, my voice quiet, carrying across the long, empty space between us. "You made me an offer." He leaned forward, mistaking my calm for weakness, for a willingness to negotiate. "Yes, I did. I'm willing to be reasonable. Eli, I'm willing to come back and help you fix this mess." He was here to save me. The delusion was breathtaking. The stage was set. The audience was about to arrive. Julian leaned forward, attempting to muster that old, easygoing charm. He steepled his fingers, like a CEO preparing to be magnanimous. "Listen, Eli," he began, his voice dropping into what he thought was a conciliatory tone. "I know I messed up. I know I was wrong, but I was under a lot of pressure, and—" He did not get to finish. The heavy glass door at the far end of the conference room hissed open. Julian's head snapped toward the sound, his rehearsed speech dying on his lips. It was not an assistant with coffee. It was Arthur, followed immediately by Marcus, followed by David, our corporate lawyer, holding a thick accordion-style legal file, and flanking David, 2 men in the dark blue, official uniforms of the Seattle Police Department. The blood drained from Julian's face. The manufactured tan suddenly looked like a coat of yellow paint. His weak smile evaporated. "Dad!" he stammered, his voice rising in panic. "Marcus David, what is this? What's going on?" He looked from face to face, searching for an ally, finding only ice. Arthur Vance walked halfway down the table and stopped. He looked at his son, not with anger, but with a cold, final assessment, as if looking at a failed investment. "You are no son of mine," Arthur said. His voice was not a shout. It was a quiet, factual statement that echoed in the absolute silence. David stepped forward and slid the heavy legal file down the polished marble table. It stopped with a sharp thud right in front of Julian. "Julian Vance," David said, his voice formal, legalistic. "You are hereby served. This is a summons for a civil suit filed by Aegis Labs in the state of Washington." Julian stared at the binder, uncomprehending. David continued, "We are seeking damages in the amount of $50 million for counts of intellectual property theft, tortious interference with a contract, and gross breach of fiduciary duty." Julian erupted in a wild, high-pitched laugh that was closer to a scream. 50 million Aegis Labs. What the hell is Aegis Labs? This is Vanguard. This is my company. You can't sue me. I am Vanguard. I finally spoke. I had not moved from my spot at the head of the table. "No, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. "Vanguard is dead. You killed it the moment you copied that USB drive. You murdered it when you tried to sell our future to Pharmadyne. This," I motioned to the room, the employees, the logo, "is mine. This is Aegis." "That's a lie," he shrieked, finally standing up. "You can't prove that." "Can't I?" I pressed a button on the console in front of me. The room filled with his voice, amplified by the hidden speakers. It was the recording from Greg Pullman's office, the affidavit I had secured, a recording Greg had been more than happy to authorize once he knew his own neck was on the line. Just forget Vanguard, Greg. Eli's getting buried in the details. I'm the real asset. A cent is all me. We cut her out. I'll license it to you for half the cost, man to man. Julian's face went white. He knew that voice. He knew that call. The two police officers stepped forward, moving quietly, professionally. They walked the length of the table until they were standing directly behind him. "Julian Vance," the taller officer said, his voice impassive. "You are under arrest for felony wire fraud and the theft of intellectual property." "Arrest," Julian whispered. He tried to turn, but the officer had already taken his arm. "You can't. This is a civil matter. This is a divorce." "It stopped being a civil matter," David said, "when you emailed your extortion demands last week, attempting to defraud this corporation." Julian turned, desperate, looking at me. "Eli, please, you can't let them do this. I'll fix it. We can fix this." David looked at his notepad, as if just remembering a minor detail. "Oh, and one last thing. Mr. Vance," he said, almost as an afterthought. "The U.S. Attorney's Office sends its thanks. Your former girlfriend, Ms. Chloe Martin, was contacted in Miami, facing her own potential conspiracy charges. She was remarkably cooperative." Julian looked confused. "She doesn't know anything?" "She knows," David interrupted, "how to back up her text messages. Turns out, she kept copies of every single text you sent her, detailing your plan to steal the code, sell it, and ditch the wife. She agreed to testify in exchange for full immunity. She was, as you noted in your email, incredibly shallow." The second officer took his other arm, and the first produced a pair of handcuffs. The click of the handcuffs locking was the sound of a safe closing. Julian's panic, which had been frantic, became guttural. He lunged, not at the officers, but at me, his voice a raw, tearing sound. "The divorce. You think you can do this? The divorce, Eli. You'll get nothing. Community property, that's the law in Washington. Half of everything is mine. That company, this building, it's half mine." He was still trying to negotiate. He still thought he was a player in a game. David, ever the surgeon, stepped forward, and his voice was the only sound in the room. He slid a second, much thinner file across the marble. It came to rest near Julian, but the officer held him back. "Your divorce, Mr. Vance," David said, his voice flat, "was finalized 3 weeks ago. In absentia." Julian stared. "What you can't. I wasn't here. I didn't sign anything." "You didn't have to," David continued, as if reading from a textbook. "You were served via public notice after failing to respond to multiple attempts at service at your last known addresses. The judge in King County Superior Court issued a default judgment. Furthermore, the court ruled that your actions, namely, the systematic premeditated embezzlement, the theft of intellectual property, and the criminal fraud you engaged in constituted gross dissipation of marital assets." David paused, letting the legal term hang in the air. "The ruling was clear. Your actions were an attempt to intentionally defraud your spouse and the marital estate. Therefore, you have forfeited any and all claim to marital property. You are entitled to nothing. 0. Not half. Not 1 cent. Julian's eyes were wide, uncomprehending. He was trying to process the numbers. "The house," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The lake house. That's $12 million. The house is half mine." It was Marcus who answered. He stepped forward, his expression almost bored. "The house," Marcus said, as if speaking to a child. "The house was leveraged. You used it as collateral for 2 separate business loans you took out without authorization last year, presumably to fund your exit." He gestured vaguely. "When you defaulted by disappearing. The bank called the loans. The asset was seized. It was sold. I watched Julian's face. He was remembering the $9 million cash sale. He was realizing it was not a sale. It was a foreclosure. It was sold, Marcus finished. To cover the business debts you created, after the bank and the creditors were paid, there was nothing left. Julian was hyperventilating now, the cuffs digging into his wrists as he strained against them. He looked at me, pure, animal desperation in his eyes. My shares, he choked out. My founder's shares, my 20%. That's separate. That's in my name. You can't touch my shares. This was my moment. All the men stepped back, as if leaving the final blow to me. I walked slowly from my end of the table until I was standing directly in front of him. He had to crane his neck to look up at me from his chair. Your shares, Julian. I asked. My voice was quiet, almost gentle. You mean your employment shares? They're founders' shares, he hissed. They are shares. I corrected him. Granted to you under the founders' agreement, the one you called lawyer bullshit, the one I drafted. I leaned closer. It states that if a key officer, namely you or I, abandons their post for more than 30 days or engages in gross misconduct, including criminal acts or theft against the company, their shares are immediately forfeit. You lose all equity, all of it. No, he whispered. No. Yes, I said. You abandoned your post 6 months ago. You stole our IP. You committed wire fraud. You breached every single line of that contract. Your shares were forfeited the day you left. So, what happened to my shares? He whispered, knowing the answer but needing to hear the sentence. They were returned to the corporate treasury, I said. And as the new CEO, I had them reallocated. I smiled. Just a small, tight smile. Your entire 20% stake, Julian, has been moved into a new, irrevocable educational trust fund. It will fund full scholarships for women entering the engineering program at the University of Washington. Your name is on the plaque, the Julian Vance Fund for Female Engineers. Your betrayal will be funding a better future, one you have no part in, for decades to come. That was the blow that broke him. The financial execution was complete. He did not have the strength to stand, even if the officers had let him. He just collapsed into the chair. The fight was gone. The charm was gone. The man was gone. All that was left was a hollow, defeated shell. The officers pulled him to his feet. As they led him past me toward the door, he stopped. He looked at me, his face no longer angry or sad, just empty. No, not empty. It was distorted, twisted with a pure black hatred that was terrifying to see. You, he choked out, the word thick with spittle. You bitch. The heavy glass door hissed shut. The click of the lock was the loudest sound in the room, a final metallic punctuation mark. Julian was gone. I turned back. Arthur and Marcus were still standing by the table, watching me. Arthur, his face impassive, walked halfway toward me. Well done, Eliza, he said. His voice was not warm, but it held a new respect. You did what was necessary. The company is in the right hands. Marcus simply nodded. Once. He never knew what hit him. They turned, together, and walked out of the room. They had protected the family legacy. Their work was done. And then I was alone. I stood in that vast, empty room, surrounded by glass and cold marble, staring at the empty chair where Julian had collapsed. The silence was absolute. I waited. I waited for the feeling of victory, for the hot surge of triumph. I waited for the satisfaction of justice served. It never came. Instead, as I stood there, all I felt was a profound, sudden lightness. It was not joy. It was the absence of weight. The 180-day war was over. The cold fire that had burned in my gut for 6 months finally, quietly, extinguished itself. I had not won. I had simply finished. I walked to the window, pressing my hand against the cool glass. I looked out over Puget Sound. The Seattle sky was its usual shade of bruised gray, but far on the horizon, a single stubborn ray of sunlight had broken through, turning a patch of the choppy water to hammered silver. I took a deep breath, the first real breath I had taken in 6 months. I pulled out my phone and called my assistant's extension. "Sarah," I said. "Yes, Ms. Vance. Cancel every meeting I have for the rest of the week, all of them. Tell Aravind he is in charge until Monday." There was a beat of silence. "Ms. Vance, is everything all right?" I watched the patch of sun on the water. "Everything," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "Is finally fine. I need to get outside." I did not go back to my office. I did not collect my briefcase. I took the elevator straight to the parking garage. I got into my car and drove. Not east to my sterile high-rise in Bellevue, but west, toward the salt air. 20 minutes later, I was at the marina. I walked down the long dock, my heels clicking, the cold wind whipping my hair across my face. I stopped at the last slip. There it was. My boat. The Aegis. I stepped aboard, untying the thick mooring lines. I started the engines, a low, deep rumble that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. I eased it out of the slip, past the breakwater, and pointed the bow toward the open sound. The city skyline, the glass tower that held my new life, the prison that held my old one. All of it grew smaller behind me. Once I cleared the channel, I stood up at the console, braced myself, and pushed the throttles all the way forward. The boat did not accelerate. It leaped. The stern dug in, the bow rose, and the engines screamed. The sound was a roar of defiance as the hull skipped across the waves at 70 miles an hour, throwing a massive white wake behind me. The wind was so loud it was a physical force, stealing my breath, stinging my eyes, and scouring my mind clean. Eliza Vance, the abandoned wife, was gone. Eliza Vance, the corporate executioner, was finished. I was not running from anything. I was just running toward myself, alone, and finally, truly, free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's connect and share our thoughts. If you want more stories like this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us a little extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.